the office, Don. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um,
It's good to visit the city every now and again. Not often.
Did your big truck fit in the parking lot?
I borrowed.
I thought you did. The parking lot.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how crowded it would be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, we are here to talk about Azure Cost Management, which, as both a former CIO and as a CEO, I'm all about cost management.
A lot
So,
of customers are these days.
yes, yeah, particularly now. Yes, that's true. Yeah. So, if you want to introduce yourself and what you do, and then we'll roll in here.
Sure. My name is Don Lewis. Synergy, I guess 8 years now ish. Been a long time. Been in the Microsoft licensing world for it's about 2008, 2009. Um, I enjoy it. Not many people do, I guess, but I'm
You're strange
quirky.
that way.
I am very, very strange. They always say find something no one else likes to do and do it well. That's, there you'll be. But no, cost is a big concern for all customers these days, right? Not just Azure, but Azure Cost Management is a tool really to allow customers to have that visibility into their cost. The old data center days,
Right.
we had sprawl, right?
Yes.
Right. Sprawl didn't cost us quite as
Yes.
much. Then because we had unlimited virtualization rights on servers and things like that, so we could just spin up VMs and it didn't really impact our cost.
Right.
Well, if you take that same approach to Azure,
Right.
very easy to spin up that same
Right.
VM,
Right.
but it does, incur a build charge. And being aware of what those are, seeing what your growth is. A lot of customers have slowly but surely gone from their data center, their on-prem data center to Azure,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to understand what the cost model was. They had some ROIs. They projected that it was going to
Right.
save them money, and they need to find out, is it really saving us money?
Okay.
So we're going to go through and talk about cost management today and how you can use it as a tool, not only to monitor or to look at your cost and see your cost, but to
Right.
monitor and build thresholds and alerting.
Okay.
Because the wrong click in Azure, right? You choose the wrong
Yeah.
VM and it's a higher end build VM. You might not know that for a month and it could be costly. So
Right.
some alerts set up there can be very helpful.
Right.
And we'll also talk about some ways that, maybe you're running exactly the right VMs, you're as lean as you can be, but there are ways to transact those in a less expensive way through reservation
Sure.
through Azure Compute.
Sure.
So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Maybe we'll save some money.
We'll try. We'll try for sure. Again, a brief agenda. I think I went through this already. I just didn't have it on the right slide.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything there?
Good.
Awesome. You might look at, a lot of times we ask Copilot questions, right? We ask
Right,
Google
right.
questions, we
Right.
ask Bing questions. You can ask questions of cost management. It's not prompts so much as filters and views and things
Okay.
like that. But these are some of the questions some customers might ask about their Azure environment. What are my current cloud costs? We see monthly invoices come in. A lot of times, in most cases, Azure is a pay as you go, and maybe your costs are increasing over month, but we do yearly budgets. What specific resources are costing me the most? Right, storage is one of those things that grows as over time,
Right.
especially depending on certain retention policies. And then managing the budgets and budget thresholds around that. So those are the type questions we'll answer.
All right.
I am going to get out of presentation mode here. I'm actually going to go into a live environment. Hopefully everyone's seeing my screen here. When you log into portal.azure.com, this is where you'd start in the home screen. And if you've never been to Azure Cost Management, it's very easy to find anything in cost management or in the Azure portal. I'm just going to start typing cost management. And you see you've got a number of areas here. I'm just going to go into cost management. And then you've got a couple of areas that you can go into. I like to just go over here into, right, reporting and analytics.
Okay.
And cost analysis is where we're doing the majority of the work in this first section. And that's looking at our cost.
Okay.
right? And this is relatively new. They've just changed this view. It used to just default to coming into accumulated costs, and that's where we'll start. But you can also look at other views. You can create your own views. So for instance, you might have a view that's shared internally
Uh-huh.
so that you don't have to slice and dice and create the filters every time,
Okay.
right? I'm going to go into accumulated cost and just take a look at uh, a number of ways you might slice this. This is really Power BI, right? Looking
Okay.
at our Azure cost data. We can look at this across multiple subscriptions. We could look at this across multiple billing scopes. So a billing scope can be a combination of subscriptions or a subset of a subscription, right? So maybe
Okay.
a departmental billing scope. We've got authority or permissions to review the cost within our department, but not another department's, right? In large organizations.
So like if we were segregating, like maybe finance resources opposed to our delivery resources, as
Right.
opposed to
Mhm.
HR resources.
That's right. And the billing scope is more of a reporting, right? It's a permissions from a reporting standpoint. So you could give someone the rights to a billing scope and they could report on that. You still can accumulate at a whole level, at an entire subscription level, right? The CIO would want to see that all up, not just their departmental stuff,
Got it.
right? So what we're looking at here, it just defaulted and we're looking at our total cost for November, right? And we've got a couple of slicers. We can look, hey, we're spending about $5,700 this month on virtual machines, $4,600 on storage. So this is the service name itself, right? So we used to just buy hardware and we knew how much that hardware cost and we capitalized that and then the licensing. Well, now we're renting these things, right? We're paying for these things as we go. And it breaks this down. Now you could certainly slice this in a number of different ways, like you could most any BI, right?
Okay.
We could look at by resource, if that was the way you wanted to look at it, right? And these resource names are things you've named internally. The resource grouping over here also allows you to consolidate those. Location is going to be data center, right? A lot of customers build out geo-redundant
Okay.
environments and knowing where they're spending the majority of, as you can see, the majority of our information is here in US East, but we've got some other, maybe some replication charges, things like that. Okay. Now, one of the questions we might ask, okay, we've started our Azure progression or we've moved our environment to Azure this year. I want to see how our costs have increased,
Right.
right, over time.
Right. Right.
So I'm going to change this date range. So I'm just going to look at this year. So it's just a quick date filter. So this year we've spent $473,000, right? I'm going to go back to service name because I want to see how much we've spent on storage this year,
Okay.
right? So 162,000. Now we might want to look at storage as growth, not all up accumulative over the year, right?
Okay.
So what I might do is look at this a little bit differently. Instead of looking at it as accumulated, I'm going to look at it as monthly.
Okay.
Now, and I might even filter this by service name. Now what we're going to see, storage is the blue.
Okay.
We're seeing the increases from month to month as our storage grows.
Okay.
And we can see huge hits, right? Oh, we went from 17 to 20,000 between the month of June and July. Well, that maps to when we transition those two file servers over.
Okay.
Okay. Virtual machines. Our virtual machine growth, January, $8,900, now 33,000.
So we have more virtual machines.
That's right. We built out this environment.
And could I drill into that even if I wanted to?
Absolutely. So now we're just looking at at virtual machines.
Okay.
Right? We can even drill down a little bit further, I believe, when you go down into this area.
And to do you, but if I wanted to, could I even look at that by resource name so I could tell which virtual machines were?
Absolutely. Resource. And this is going to get a little bit, depending on the number of resources you have, that'll get a little bit. The great thing about this is you can just download this data to a spreadsheet,
Okay.
right? And export this. You can either do it as an image, right? If we just want to share the information but not give the data, or we can send this as an Excel spreadsheet. Now we've got the real data and we can take the numbers and probably plug into another spreadsheet that we're monitoring, right? Some sort of budgetary thing. Great question. You see value in that? And being able to drill into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when we go back to cost analysis, I'm just going to go and look at a couple of other views, right? I'm just going to go to exports here and then go back to cost analysis because it resets the view. Yeah, it's better than trying to go back. So for instance, you can look at daily cost by service. These are some default views that Microsoft thinks you might want to see if you've got a Kubernetes clusters, et cetera. You might drill into that. In this one, we don't have any data there, right? So a lot of these are just canned views. But a lot of times what you do is you take a view and then you save. So earlier we, changed some filters. We grouped by, what do we do? Resource, I think, right? We can save that view. And you remember earlier how we had the shared view? So we could save this view so that we don't have to do those filters every time.
Are we helping customers with any of this? Like, have we had any requests with customers saying, hey, can you help me create views?
Yeah, absolutely. And usually it's a result of the next segment really of the presentation. And that's, Microsoft provides a lot of default ways to group and sort, but internally we might want to have some ways that don't exist. And that's where tagging resources comes in. Yeah. So the notion of smacking a label on a resource, and you can have any number of those. For instance, I'm going to go over here to this one. I'm going to change it to tag just so that we can see. So here's a list of the available tags within the system. Some of them are by default, like when it was created. Right. And that's a great thing. Hey, we can see when this VM was created. And know who created it and have kind of an audit trail. I like to see, and I help customers with a lot of times, cost allocation.
Yeah.
Right. The infrastructure is this ecosystem, and they might have 5 different departments that all share in this ecosystem. And for profitability reporting and things like that, they need to understand what their cost was, right? Sales has this big CRM thing that they use a lot of times, and there's a cost associated with that. So departmental tagging is something I've helped customers with a lot of times. It's very difficult to report to a level of detail you're not willing to enter it. So tags are a way to allow us to create this custom. And for this particular example, I chose used by. We've got all company resources. We've got end user computing. We've got engineering, GIS. They're still in the process of working through tagging their resources. As you can imagine, there's a ton of resources out there. So you're trying to make sure that you tag them appropriately. And, GIS uses a lot of storage costs because of the imagery, the high resolution imagery that they're taking up. So they want to make sure that they allocate the cost appropriately. No, great question. And I would say most customers would benefit from tagging at some level.
Yeah, I mean, I know that our operations team comes to me all the time and says XYZ customer wants us to give them an invoice that shows the charges for finance and the charges for HR and the charges for whatever. And that's something that I believe they invariably will go back to you and say, Dawn, can you help them tag the resources appropriately so that they can just get that from their cost management view?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's you could it's easier to do it on the front end than it is to go back and retag everything as you go, as you make it a part of your normal VM creation or your resource creation to tag that resource. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, they all do. So for instance, if we were to go over, and let's just, go around a little bit. I could type, and we're just going to go to resource groups. And we'll go to M365. And you'll see tags. Right. So right now, this is the only one, but we could choose any number of the tags available to assign.
Okay.
Right. So we could say the in description if there was a value, and then we've got some values. This is a standard modeling config.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of these are built out by default. Some of them are system, like we say, date created.
Okay.
Right. So you don't necessarily have to do that. Great question. Any questions about kind of the reporting in the cost management?
Oh, no, I mean, I think for me, the most important thing is that you have to think through how you want to tag resources and if you can, set that up at the beginning, like when you're creating your resources, assign the tags so
Yeah.
that you're not going back and retroactively doing that. Because like in the case of this scenario, they have a lot of resources that have to go back and be tagged.
Yeah.
If you do go back and tag them, can you then retroactively look at how the costs were?
Historically,
Okay.
that resource is
Okay.
live. Yeah, absolutely. But you bring up a good point though. When you think about how you want to break costs down when you're architecting your environment, a lot of times customers don't split their storage accounts into multiple accounts.
Sure.
It's a single storage account with you're using a portion of it. I can't divide up a single storage
Okay.
account. So we might say, hey, I'm going to set up a storage account for GIS. I'm going to set up a storage account. Now we can break those down from a cost perspective.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah. And does that increase your cost for storage or it's?
No, I think there's some flat fees for having a storage account, right? But from a standpoint, storage is very inexpensive.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So this allows us to manually or actively go in and look at our cost if we think there's a problem or if we want to know where we're at
Okay.
with something. But we're very busy, right? We'd like this
Right.
to do it for us. So built into this are budgets and alerts. So we can set budgets on certain costs, utilization, anomalies, any number of things. So for instance, I'm just going to go in and look at budgets. And I created a sample budget here, right? I put a budget of $13,000 because it gives you some actual recommendations when you're looking at this, the action group. So this is 90% of budget, and I want to be alerted when this happens. So I create the budget, and then I set up the alert for that right here in this system, right? So this would be a cost alert, all in the budget section.
Okay.
You also have the ability to do cost alerts, and these are more anomaly based.
Okay.
Right? So an anomaly might be more VMs have spun up in a 24-hour period than you expected.
Okay.
Right? Or storage costs growing at a higher rate than you anticipated.
Okay.
So anomalies will allow you can report on those as well. Hey, I didn't set a budget for this, but this is outside the norm.
Okay.
Right? Storage costs have grown 150% of what we expected.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can create alerts there. So with the appropriate setup, it can almost not maintain itself, but monitor itself, certainly.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, when we get into that, ultimately, customers come in, see how much Azure's costing them. The next question is, well, how can we do this cheaper?
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, as we know that's the next question.
It's almost too easy to provision resources.
It is.
Expensive very quickly.
It is. It is. And many times those that are spinning up the resources aren't necessarily in touch with the cost of that. Right? These are technical resources that they need a server. Right? They've got a service that they need to spin up and roll out. And they've been told to do that, so they assume the cost have been taken care of. They have the permissions. It's easy to spin it up.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And then a month later, someone's asking us, well, why did our Azure cost go up?
Right.
We go into cost management. We go back and we look and we see, well, this particular VM is what drove the cost up. But let's just say in a stable Azure environment, I don't recommend doing this too early in their Azure journey simply because some workloads aren't yet stable.
Okay.
right? We might find that that VM is more than we need or less than we need, or the different classification, et cetera. But Microsoft has done a really good job with this tool. It's the advisor recommendations. And if you can't, if you're not in cost alerts, you can come up here and just start typing advisor, right? And it'll come in. And it's coming in with a number of recommendations: security, reliability. We're going to focus on cost a little bit, right? And when we go into this, it has recommendations based on our environment with potential yearly savings.
I would bet there are a lot of customers that don't realize that.
Yeah. No, I surprise customers with it all the time. Now, in this particular subscription, these are real numbers.
Right. Yeah.
These are real numbers, and I am in conversations with this particular customer to take care of this, or act on some of these. Now, the thing to look at, or the thing to think about when you're looking at this is these are sometimes duplicates. So, for instance, this and this, right, are the same thing. So you can't save both of those.
Okay.
Right. They're just two different options to save the same thing.
Right.
So we're going to look at reserved instances simply because they're a little easier to wrap your head around. Because you have a named instance type, you know exactly how much that instance costs you per hour, per month, right? What we're going to do is say, I'm going to reserve that instance. I'm going to pay you a lower price, but I'm going to commit to running that instance for 12 months,
right,
or 36 months. A lot of the savings, Microsoft does look at the 3-year term. And there are some examples where I do recommend that, but in most cases, I recommend a 1-year term.
Okay.
The reason being the delta between a 1-year and a 3-year reservation is typically only 10 to 15%, right?
And you can turn it down.
Yeah. But now you're committing to that reservation for 3 years. 3 years is an eternity in our world.
Yes.
3 years ago, we didn't have Copilot.
Right.
Right. And here we are. So that changes the game substantially.
If I'm going to use an analogy to compare a instance to just a pay-as-you-go instance, it would be like, so in either case, you're renting a car, let's say, you don't own it. If you go to a car rental agency and you rent the car, your rate per day is going to be a lot higher because they don't know how long you're going to have that car. Versus if you sign a lease, your lease is going to be lower because you're committing to
36 months.
Right. Exactly.
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. In fact, I've always used the lease versus buy the car analogy when it came to subscription versus perpetual licensing, but it fits very well to a reservation. Absolutely.
Okay.
Great point. As we look at these reservations, what it does is it comes up and brings you a list on that recommendation. It shows you the actual VMs that it's referring to, or instance types that it's referring to, and the potential savings. So if I'm looking at this from hey, I really want to move the needle, I'm going to buy these 19 standard NV18Ss and save 48 grand a year.
Wow, that's real money.
Right. And what it does is it simply takes you right from there. Now, again, it's pointing us to a 3-year reservation, and I caution customers a little bit to be aware of the filtering. Okay, our request is being throttled today. So you see we've got a 3-year filter term. I'm going to turn that off, and you'll see now we've got the 1-year and the 3-year option for that reservation. Okay. So we could add that to our cart and purchase directly.
Okay. And do we have to migrate the resources for that, or it just converts?
No, that's a great question. And I've struggled with a great way to explain that. Let's see. I'm trying to get this back here. I minimized it. So the reservation, think of it like a token.
Okay.
Right? You don't necessarily go and manually match it up to an instance. It offsets the compute for an instance that matches it.
Okay.
Right? So as an example, let's say you have 3 instances and only 2 reservations. Right? 100% utilization. You're completely utilizing those reservations for the first 2 instances, and you're still paying metered billing for the third.
Okay.
Doesn't matter which of the 3 is which.
So to use another analogy, back when we used to have minutes on our cell
Mhm,
phone plan,
mhm.
it's sort of like that.
Exactly like that.
Okay.
Exactly. Minutes on a cell phone. Yeah. And how many texts you could have, remember? Oh, yeah. Yeah, calling cards. Anyway, yeah. But so one of the things that I tell customers, just like you're saying, to make sure that they match up when you go into the reservation, once you've purchased it, is it has a utilization value.
Mm.
And I tell them, look, 2 days after we've made the reservation, go in to make sure you're seeing 100% utilization.
Okay.
If you're not seeing utilization, then it isn't matched up correctly. We've either purchased it in the wrong data center, we purchased the wrong type, and when you start looking at instance types, the V3s, the V4s, the V5s,
Right.
it's very easy to pick
Right.
the wrong one, right? So that's just a follow-up we do to make sure that it tracks.
Size server, and sometimes I'm gonna need 13, 14, whatever for dev or whatever. I'm gonna create a reserved instance for the 10, and then I'm gonna flex with the others.
That's exactly right.
Got it.
Exactly. Like a hybrid model.
Yeah.
Annual, monthly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's there is a new option, the Azure Savings Plan. And what it does is it offsets what you're doing is committing to an overall number of compute hours,
Okay.
right? And in doing so, it's very similar to a reservation, but you're just buying compute. It doesn't really care what type of compute.
Okay.
So for some customers, it's a little bit easy. It's easier for those customers that are still in flex, right?
Mhm.
They're changing instance types. They're trying to figure out how many service accounts they need now. Oh, can we consolidate these all
Right.
into a bigger instance type? But they still want to recognize the savings. So the Azure Compute is where you can do that single year or 3 years as well.
Okay.
So in this sense, they're recommending, as an example, to commit to a little over 9,000 hours or
Okay.
9,000 compute hours.
Okay. And
Right.
is it showing us what our savings is?
It's the cost summary here. The savings was shown back on the
Yeah.
advisor recommendations.
Okay.
And again, it assumes the 3 year,
So it's
right?
this one right here.
Correct. Savings plan. And as you see, it doesn't save quite as much as the reservations,
Right.
right? You're paying for a more generic resource. You're not being very specific. And if you think about it, Microsoft has only a certain number of resource or instance types in a data center, right? They allocate those, and once those are consumed, sometimes we've had to ask, hey, can we get one more allocated to this data center because this customer. So their ability to project the needs for those with a
Sure.
reservation,
Sure.
Provide them additional savings.
Sure.
So it also provides some monitoring on if you're this might represent a machine that sits out there and is never utilized,
Okay.
right?
So maybe it's a dev machine that gets used every once in a while.
Exactly. Or a lot of times when you're using Windows 365, you might have disks that were attached to those, but then you got rid of the VMs or the Windows 365, and now you've got unallocated disk storage sitting out
I
there.
feel like I've heard that a lot from
Yeah.
customers.
This will find that as well. So this is finding a few VMs, right? That's maybe the VMs are a little bigger than they need to be, right? This is from a CPU utilization, right? 34% memory. So we might look at this to right size our instance types. And then that last one we talked about, I think it'll have here's those disks, right? 25 disks, right? It tells you where it is, what the name is, and then you go out and delete it if appropriate.
Okay. Wow. I had no idea.
Good. But that's cost management. Like I say, we try to answer those questions for customers on their cost. Azure is a wonderful playground. And I see more and more customers moving their typical infrastructure, their servers,
Right.
their SQL server, their Windows. It's just a lift and shift.
Yeah.
The next time they have to pay that $1 million data refresh, to buy new hardware, they're like, "I'm gonna do that." So
And so what I will say is that if you have an Azure environment and you would like us to go through this exercise with you, we are happy to do so.
Yeah.
Don
I like it. I don't
likes
know.
this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just do.
Yeah.
I do. Well, I mean, sharing, getting a customer to a point where they're more comfortable with their spend. They might not reduce their spend, but just knowing that they're spending it in the right way is a huge advantage. And they can go to their
Yeah.
leadership and say, hey, I know we're spending a lot of money, but we have to, and here's what is benefiting us.
Yeah. I think that's the real challenge, that we have customers that are spending $75,000-$80,000 a month on Azure, sometimes north of that.
Yeah.
Um, and they're not entirely sure why, but they don't know what resources are consuming it. They don't know, where could I save it? And this is a great exercise to go through with them to really help them out.
It really is.
And it's certainly something that we're happy to do for customers for people that are not our customers.
Yeah.
We are absolutely happy to do that. We're a Microsoft partner and we're here to help you.
Yeah, I do this as an engagement with customers that aren't our licensing customers.
Right.
Want an outside view of things, and then I do this with a lot of our licensing customers as well. So
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Always good to come to the office.
Do you have any more slides we want to go through, or are we good?
No, I think so. Q&A maybe. I think really we just got the question slides. No, we don't even have. There it is. I'm awful at PowerPoint. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I look forward to speaking with him.
Thank you.